In video 1, we primarily focused on naming the pitch class of intervals. And the pitch class is simply the number you arrive at when you count lines and spaces or letter names of your intervals. Remember, an interval is the distance between two notes. When we talked about our diatonic triads, we also talked about the quality of them. So in the key of C, C is 1, your 1 chord is major, but your 2 chord is minor. 3 is minor, 4 and 5 are major, 6 is minor, 7 is diminished, and back to 1 at the octave, major again. So in our discussion of intervals, the distance between two notes, they also have qualities. Major, minor, minor, major, major, minor, minor, major. There's also augmented and diminished intervals. So the word for that is quality. To look at the qualities of our intervals, we're going to do a couple of things to make the task more manageable. Right now we're going to take the root of our scale, is just a C major scale, and then place on top of it each note of the scale to make an interval from the root. So when we do that, when we have scale degree 1 over scale degree 1, we have what we call a perfect unison. Our fourth will be perfect, our fifth will be perfect, and our octave will be perfect. A unison, think of it as two of the same notes. Of course, I only have one piano, so there's only one note here. You could pretend I'm on two pianos, or maybe here. Right finger and left finger are both playing a C. So now what if they switch roles? And then they switch again. In other words, no matter who plays which C, it's the same either way. Any perfect interval, if you shift it down by a half step, in other words, from C to G is a fifth, but if I go to G flat, hear that intensity? That's what we call a diminished interval. So a perfect interval, when you lower it, is going to be called diminished. So there's a perfect fifth, diminished fifth. And when you raise it, it's called augmented. Perfect fifth, augmented fifth. Perfect fourth, augmented fourth. So any of your perfect intervals, when you shrink it by moving 1/2 step, then it's called diminished. And when you expand it by moving 1/2 step, you call it augmented. So it's going to be important to remember that the quality of the intervals unison, octave, fourth, and fifth, as they show up in our scale, they're all perfect intervals. The rest of them are going to be called major intervals. So once again, unison, fourth, fifth, and octave are perfect intervals. Second, third, sixth, and seventh are going to be major. Now we'll take a look at our major intervals. So here's a major second, C to D. So if I go C to D sharp, that's going to be an augmented second. Bring it back to major. And if I lower the D to D flat, then that's a minor second. So we have major second, augmented second, major second, minor second, diminished second. Because I'm going to call this a C, and I'm going to call this a D, double flat. D, D flat, D double flat. So your diminished second actually sounds like a unison. But in name, a unison would be two C's. A diminished second would be a C and a D double flat. Here's a major third. If we lower this, we have a minor third. And if we lower it again, we have a diminished third, which looks like a second. They sound the same, but their name's different. C and D is a major second, but C to E double flat is a diminished third. Major third, minor third, diminished third. And if we expand our major third, it becomes an augmented third, which looks and sounds like a fourth. But again, C, D, E, E sharp. So when we call this an E sharp, then we have an augmented third. If we were calling it an F, then it would be a perfect fourth. All right, our next major interval, we did 2, we did 3. So our next major interval is 6. There's a major 6. If we stretch it, it's an augmented 6. And if we shrink our major 6, it becomes a minor 6. And if we shrink it one more time, it's a diminished 6. But we're looking at this G here as an A double flat. A flat, A double flat. So a diminished 6 interval sounds like a perfect fifth, but they're different in the way that they're named. And then here's our major 7th. Augmented 7th sounds like our octave, but this would be a B sharp. If we take our major 7th to B flat, we now have a minor 7th. And then if we lower it again, it's a diminished 7th. And our diminished 7th sounds like a 6th, but instead of calling this as A, it's a B double flat. Let's take a major third, C to E. Well, if we make the E an E sharp, which I know that's weird because that would be the same as an F, but sometimes we're going to call it an E sharp. C, D, E, 1, 2, 3. But now it's an E sharp. We've expanded that major third into an augmented. But here's what's weird. When you take a major interval and you lower it by a half step, it becomes a minor. So C, E, C, D, E, 1, 2, 3. C to E is a major third. But if you lower the E to an E flat, it's now a minor third. C to E flat is a minor third. What if we were to flatten it again? Well, then we would call it a diminished third. Again, it gets a little weird because an E double flat would be a D as far as what it looks like and sounds like on a piano. But sometimes we're not going to call it a D, we're going to call it an E double flat. So once again, C, D, E, 1, 2, 3. But if our E is flat, it becomes a minor third. And if we double flat that E, it becomes a diminished third. So once again, unison, fourth, fifth, and octave are perfect intervals. Second, third, sixth, and seventh are going to be major. And keep in mind, that's just when we look at these intervals as we relate them to the root of our scale. So the C major scale, C against C, C against D, C against E, and so on. This is just a start so we can understand how these things work.